Well, as the vaccine supply builds against COVID-19 in this country, the focus is now shifting to delivery of those shots across the country. And there's a lot riding on the success or failure of those rollouts from provincial premiers. The Angus Reid Institute has been tracking the performance of the premiers so far, according to their provincial constituents. So how are they doing? Who's getting positive reviews and who's not so much? Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. She joins me now. Shachi, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me. COVID-19 vaccinations, biggest thing on the plate of every premier these days, and already we're seeing some bumps in the vaccine delivery in some provinces with phone lines crashing, confusion over vaccine priority groups. What's on the line over the next few months for provincial leaders?
So this is the key performance indicator for premiers in the same way that it has been for Prime Minister Trudeau over the last 2 months. And of course, we've seen his political approval really sink in the eyes of Canadians as Canada got tripped up over delayed delivery and confusion over how much and when and would we still make targets. All of that spotlight now moves to the premiers. And over the next 2-3 months for them, over the next quarter, this will be the issue, the one main issue that people in their own respective provinces are really gauging their performance on.
Right. Now, Canadians are mostly a generous people. We like to say that, but they're not afraid to speak their mind when it comes to rating their political leaders. What have they been telling you about the performance of the premiers so far? And maybe let's start with the overall numbers. Who gets higher marks and who's struggling?
Sure. So at the top of the leaderboard, so to speak, or receiving higher approval ratings than others, you see in BC, John Horgan, and in Quebec, Francois Legault, followed by Scott Moe in Saskatchewan. So they're sort of at the top of the heap. Then you've got a bunch that's sort of in the middle with Doug Ford. His numbers are still at 50%, which, by the way, let's remember, pre-pandemic, you'd be popping champagne if you had 50% approval. Now, not so much anymore, because everyone's managed to benefit, at least for some period of time, for what we call the pandemic bump, right? Everyone had this elevating effect on their numbers. So Doug Ford's there. You've got Andrew Furey in kind of a weird, exceptional place where as many people approve of him as disapprove of him. And then more towards the back of the pack are the two premiers who have continued to really struggle through pandemic management, who have been Brian Pallister and Jason Kenney. Rounding out those numbers is a brand new premier on the scene. That's Premier Rankin in Nova Scotia. Right. The deal with him is that he has the lowest approval ratings in the country, but that's because the vast number of Nova Scotians actually don't have an opinion about him. 50% say they don't know him well enough to gauge.
Okay, why are the higher ranking premiers doing well? Let's drill down a little bit. What are they doing that's earning them higher approval numbers?
So it's really a combination of, I would say, style and circumstance. People are responding to them personally. In BC, you continue to see John Horgan through the ups and downs, the highs and lows. He tends to come off in a way that people are okay with. And he's also sort of, I think, affected a little bit by the halo that continues to surround provincial health. Chief Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry in British Columbia, who's become something of a folk hero, not just at home, but across the country. So he gets a bit of that glow as well. Again, in Quebec, you've got Francois Legault, who, despite issues with massive losses in long-term care facilities and real political problems, is liked and admired by his constituents. In both cases, you also have an inability of the opposition parties provincially to break through. The BC Liberal Party in BC is in tough spot, and in Quebec, you're dealing with a number of other opposition parties who are sort of diffusing that level of opposition.
And what's causing the popularity problems for the lower ranking premiers? What are they facing?
Well, particularly in Manitoba and Alberta, you see two things happening. You see conservative right-leaning premiers who are really struggling with having to navigate walking the line between making public health a priority, so we need to shut things down, versus that more libertarian streak that they find among their support bases who are saying, look, our economies are tanking, you've got to open it up. And that pressure is especially on Jason Kenney, who was elected on a promise to turn Alberta's economy around. That hasn't been happening. The pandemic isn't helping. Doug Ford in Ontario is also facing some of that squeeze.
Yeah, tell me more about that. What's the challenge for Doug Ford? We've watched his numbers sink significantly over the last little while. What's happening?
Well, first they shot straight up and then they started to sink. I think it's really important to remember that Doug Ford personally is still more approved of, more popular than he was, this time before the pandemic started. So this time a year ago. So his numbers are trending in a downward direction, but he's still hanging in there. I think what I would say with Ford is, first of all, people really, warmed up to his change in persona at the beginning of the pandemic. He went from being a combative politician to premier dad. People warmed up to that, but over time, we're seeing his numbers starting to decline, in part, again, because of that tension around keep it locked down versus open it up and the many views around that, but also because he's also pursuing legislative agendas in Ontario that's really raising the ire of the universities, teachers. We saw the announcement around MZOs. All of those things also serve to drag into the political mix.
Less than a minute here, but since I've got you with us, we've talked about the premiers. Let's talk, looking at federal leaders, the Prime Minister still holds a lead over the Conservatives and ERIN O'Toole. And so far, the Conservative leader's struggling to build support and facing now unrest within his own party. Why is ERIN O'Toole having traction trouble?
He's having traction trouble in part because there really is, I think, a lack of buy-in or trust on both sides of the base that he's trying to straddle. So you just mentioned that there are ranks within his own party base that see him trying to move to the center, and they're saying, hey, dude, where are you going? We don't want you to go over there to the center. We want you to stay true blue like you promised to. In the meantime, he knows that the only growth for the party is to pivot to the center. But right now, the center-left voter in Canada is looking at him and still feeling quite standoffish, and he has not had the opportunity to break through there. It's a little awkward. It's like he's molting. He's transitioning. We'll see where this goes.
All right. Shachi Kurl, always great to get your perspective. Thanks for providing it again tonight. Take care.
Thank you, Peter.